So yeah, if you're not familiar with Local Futures, it's not as well known actually in this country as it should be. It's a worldwide organisation. It's the organisation which is at the head of the worldwide movement to relocalize, to turn globalization back on itself, economic globalization, because it's economic globalization, of course, which has got us into the absolute catastrophe of the climate and ecological emergency, and the specific catastrophe of the pandemic as well, of course. Yeah, we wouldn't have had the pandemic in the first place if there hadn't been the habitat destruction, which is a product of economic globalization going on, in this case in China, and the pandemic wouldn't have spread at breakneck speed around the world if we hadn't had the insane level of international air travel that we have. Jet planes, I say, are the true super spreaders. So the coronavirus crisis is a crisis of economic globalization, and it's a moment where the seemingly unstoppable force of economic globalization can be stopped and turned back, and it has been to some extent. There has not been a full bounce back of air travel, and that gives us an absolutely vital opportunity to say no to further airport expansion and to turn air travel back. Local Futures was founded by Helena Norberg-Hodge, who's a colleague of mine. She's the author of an amazing book called Ancient Futures, which is really the sort of Bible of the counter-globalization movement in this regard. I strongly recommend it. You can find all their stuff at the Local Futures website. There's a great film called The Economics of Happiness. They do all sorts of fascinating things. For example, they do things they call reality tours. What reality tours involve is taking people from peasant societies, from the so-called developing world, from indigenous cultures, and bringing them to countries like this and showing them the reality of countries like this. So they take them to shopping malls, and they take them to car parks, and they take them to waste dumps and incinerators, and they take them to care homes, which are often incredibly shocking for people from indigenous and peasant societies to go to care homes where old people are being sort of warehoused away from their families. And they try to show them all dimensions of the reality of a society like ours, and how basically we're not all we're cracked up to be, and we're not something to aspire to in the way that so many people in poorer countries think that we are. They think that in America and Britain these are lands flowing with milk and honey, and everybody's incredibly happy and so on, and they don't realize actually that we've got an epidemic of mental ill health in this country. We've got rampant inequality. Happiness levels are much less than they were in the 1960s when people had much less material wealth and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's what the Local Futures organization is about, and that's been very important to the relocalization work that I've done, and the work that I've written with Helena, which you can also find by Googling if you're interested. So, questions? And we've got the sun, yay!
Woo! If you're happy to shout, put your hand up and shout, and if not, I'll come over and shout.
Or you can come up to the mic and ask your question if you wish.
Graham?
Could you explain the concept of energy descent? I haven't heard it before, and I didn't know whether it's descent D-I-S-S or D-E-S-T.
Oh, right, okay, sorry, yeah, another technical term. Yeah, no, energy descent, D-E-S-C-E-N-T. So the idea there is that we will lose less energy, we will use less energy in the future. And that is reality, that is certain. The question is whether we try to carry on using more energy for a long period to come, in which case there will be a crash, and after that we will use a lot less energy because we'll be back probably to something like a Stone Age society, or whether we have a deliberate voluntary energy descent. In terms of the idea, which is sometimes mooted, of running the same economy that we have on purely renewable energy, that is a fantasy, and it's very clear that it's a fantasy. If you look at the work, for example, of Richard Heinberg, there just isn't the renewable energy resource to do that, and if you tried to do it, you would have an ecological catastrophe on your hands, because you need to remember that to harness renewable energy at very high levels requires a very great deal of mining, It requires a much larger electricity grid, etc., which is all based on mining, and it also is energy intensive in itself, actually. This is an idea which was present in the film, which some of you probably have seen, Planet of the Humans. Planet of the Humans, a film which is in many ways is very flawed. Lots of mistakes in it, and lots of unnecessary negativity about the green movement and about renewable energy and about Bill McKibben and so on. But there is something right in the film in its idea that we cannot expect to simply replace like for like the existing system and society with an entirely green or renewable society. It's not going to be like that. So either we choose to look to a future where we reduce to some significant extent our reliance on energy, or that descent will be forced upon us in a chaotic collapse. At the moment, the latter outcome looks obviously a lot more likely, but of course that's why we're in Extinction Rebellion, to try to create the possibility of the former. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, if there's anything else I said which is needs explaining, please say.
As you're trying to go towards, obviously people aren't necessarily.
Mic check.
So what I was going to ask Rupert there, just to go off that, is a lot of people don't like being told what to do. It's a big argument saying you're trying to tell us how to do this. So there needs to be some sort of managed transition for this energy descent, right? So I know contraction and convergence is one option for that. What would you say was the viable, realistic way to actually do this that gets enough people on board that it doesn't end in that coming about through a chaotic way?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's lots could be said about that. The simple, short answer from a XR point of view would be, well, this would be a great thing to be decided by a citizens' assembly or series of citizens' assemblies. Maybe that might maybe that could happen at some point. But what I would also say is, thinking about it from a kind of transformative adaptation point of view, I think the way to do it is to show leadership. And what I mean by that is, if you get increasing numbers of people in intentional communities or eco-villages, or in just ordinary neighborhoods, or places where there are forward-looking local authorities and so forth, showing that it's possible to live with quite a lot less energy than most of us currently live with, and that it's possible to be happy while doing it, well, that will have an enormous kind of positive effect in terms of kind of demonstrating a possibility that other people will then be able to potentially, copy or be inspired by. So that's a bit like the point about the reality tours. When people see the reality of what we have, and then they compare it with something else which is not just possible but actual, well, that could be incredibly inspiring. So yeah, that's part of what I hope will occur over the next 5 or 10 years. We'll have more and more examples of people at various scales living lower energy lifestyles, and showing that it's possible to be happier and healthier while doing so. But you're absolutely right. It's not going to work by and large for this to be simply imposed upon people. So that's why, obviously, from an XR perspective, the sensible way to do it at scale would be to get democratic buy-in through something like a citizens' assembly.
My name's Ali. I'm a member of a group on Facebook called Positive Deep Adaptation. We discuss under the conclusion that collapse is inevitable, rather than the overwhelming odds that you refer to. I wonder if there's a forum that you have set up, or that you're fully aware of, that where a discussion place online for us to talk about transformative adaptation. We are in the process of trying to set up, as you say, eco-villages, intentional communities, at the moment mostly in the West Country, regardless, under the radar, regardless of being told that we can't do that.